6, okay, for now. Okay, so we said yesterday, today is Monday, the second time and probably the last time we'll learn this, and unfortunately we won't come to the end, which is very interesting. We said last time that there's 3 instances of sofer, sefer, v'sipur. There's the person who writes the story, there's the book that he writes, and there's the story that he's telling. Okay. So now he says, Torah shebechtav nikra sefer. The Torah shebechtav is obviously the book. That's what it sounds like. Ubchinat sofer shelemala b'bchinat sefer. But the person who's writing the book, he's higher than the book itself. So it's sofer, sefer, v'sipur. The author, the book, and the story. So the Torah shebechtav, the written Torah, is obviously the sefer. It's obviously the writing. And the idea behind the writing is, somebody asked me this yesterday in an email, why don't we give so much value to, for instance, ancient Hebrew script? Because one of the big innovations of the Torah was the script itself, meaning that when we say that it's written Torah, we don't just mean that these words were written, but the actual letters were new. In the time of Moshe Rabbeinu, the world, the Near Eastern world, to letters, different letters. So when Moshe Rabbeinu brought the Torah down, you could say that the first innovation was, what does it say?
Language.
No, the language was still the same language, but the script was completely different. These were different letters. They're what we use today, these letters. These letters in the book. As opposed to the ancient script, which was something close to pictograph, meaning that the letter resembled a certain word.
Oh.
Okay. What we retain from that today is that every letter in Hebrew, its name means something. But it's not that the shape is related to the meaning, okay, of the name. And the name has some meaning, and then there's the form. The form is something else, and then there's the number. There's 3 dimensions in each letter. The name, the form, and the number. And each one of these is separate, and you have to explain why are they even connected. In the old script, it was that the shape was the same as the name. The form and the name were the same. They actually built off of one another. In any case, he brought down a new script. So that's why it's called written Torah. Right, so we read all this. And now he says, that's what it means, Ayeh Soferet HaMigdalim, meaning that Ayeh, he's the Sofer, he's the writer. Who's this? The Keter, the crown. And he's the one who's writing this book. Shu Aleph Yud Kei, the Aleph represents the Keter, and the Yud and Hey, they represent Chochmah and Bina. So he's the Ayeh, Ki Makor V'Shorish Yud Kei, the Shem Havai, Nimshar Mibchinat HaAleph, Shu B'chinat Chochmah Da'atzilut. So the Yud Kei, which here represents Chochmah and Bina together, so they both come out of the Aleph, which here represents the root of the Chochmah. The root of the Chochmah is obviously the Keter, the nothingness above. Meaning the root, because here he said like the wisdom of emanation, so it sounded like it was the same thing. But here it means the root of the wisdom of emanation. In any case, another way of saying this is to say, it's the chokhmah of the keter. It's the chokhmah of the keter. Chokhmah stima is chokhmah in the keter. It's partzuf arich. Moshe Katuv, Aleph cha chokhmah. And there's a beautiful pasuk in I think it's in Eov. Aleph cha chokhmah means I'll teach you wisdom. But the word to teach in Hebrew is le'alef. It's like Aleph, from the word Aleph. So it's Aleph cha chokhmah, that the Aleph teaches wisdom to the wisdom itself. ועוד שבאות א' נכללו בו ג' אותיות השם הוויה ברוך הוא, כנודע מהאריזה של תמונת א' בתורה שבכתב הוא י' וא' ולפנים י' וד'. What he says here is that when you write the letter Aleph in our script, in the Torah's script, it's actually composed, and this is how a scribe would do it. It's actually made up of 3 different letters. The 3 different letters, they represent the Aleph Yud Hey in 2 different ways. He says in the Torah you write it in one way, it's a Yud, a Vav, and a Yud. The shape is like you make a Vav, and then there's a Yud above and a Yud below. And in the tefillin and mezuzos, you make it like a yud vav daled, according to the Arizal. You know, that the Alter Rebbe was commissioned by his teacher, by the Maggid, to rewrite or to reframe a writing for scribes. What's the reason? The reason is very interesting, because we don't have the luchos. We don't know how, or what Moshe Rabbeinu's Torah looked like. We don't know exactly how he wrote it. So what we have is very interesting, that they described what they saw. Meaning in halacha, when you read it in Shulchan Aruch, what does it say? It gives you a description of how the letter is supposed to be. The problem is that a picture is worth 1,000 words. It's very, very hard to describe something perfectly in such a way that you'll cover everything.
There's no doubt.
Right. And there's always questions, always. So in a certain sense, what we have is an approximation. And since over time there were different understandings of what was being said, so there even became a few different books, Movektia and others that had a different take on what the original script was. Of course, the best thing would be just see what Moshe Rabbeinu wrote, but we don't have that. The reason we don't have that is because that becomes Torah Sheba'al Peh, because Hashem wants that. It's not because Hashem wants there to be a myriad opinions. He doesn't want there to be just one simple thing. The Torah Shebechtav, the written Torah, has to beget many different thoughts, many different directions.
Shouldn't it be universally accepted?
It is universally accepted.
How come there's two different? I heard from a sofer that there is a difference between Arizal's.
Yeah, of course.
Mainly
No,
with
I'm
the
saying
shin.
the
Mainly with the shin.
halachas are universally accepted.
Ah,
How to interpret
the
them is not.
representation isn't.
But that's exactly that. It always strikes me as interesting that people have a fear of plurality of ideas. Why? Because somehow Hashem is not able to carry all the ideas. Hashem is not big enough for them.
That's not the problem.
It's a fear. It's a fear that somehow that if this is what Hashem said, so it must be just that He said one thing. But we know that Hashem, Dvar Hashem kepatisha fotzet sela, that Hashem's word is like a hammer on a stone. It shatters it into many, many pieces. So every person gets a piece, and only when you see everything together can you understand the wholeness of the truth. I say it another way, that this is a basic question: why is Talmud the most important book in Jewish life? Why is it what everybody learns? What's so special about it? Why? Another question: why did the Shulchan Aruch become the go-to book for halacha? How did these two things happen? So what do they have in common? What they have in common is that they bring everything. Meaning the Talmud brings everybody. It doesn't even necessarily tell you who it agrees with. It brings every single opinion that was legitimate. Opinion has to be legitimate. You have to work by certain rules. But the rules allow you to make statements that are different from one another. One person has this logic, another person thinks this way. And they're both true. So the Talmud is the only book that we have which is all dialogue between the Chachamim. It was written in that way, to teach you, and that's why we all learn it, to teach us that it's all about dialogue in the end, because nobody can hold on to all of Hashem. Every person gets a certain piece of his chelik, his part in the Torah. What did the Shulchan Aruch do that the Ramah, for instance, didn't do? They were contemporaries, or at the same time. The Ramah was about to write a book. What the Shulchan Aruch did, what the Beis Yosef did, Rabbi Yosef Karo, is that before he wrote the Shulchan Aruch, he wrote the Beis Yosef. He wrote his commentary first on the Rambam, and in the Rambam he showed that he knew all of Shas very well, because he found all the sources of the Rambam, except for in a few places that he writes, I don't know what his source is. The Rambam didn't bring any sources. Nobody knows where he got his. You can guess, but so first he wrote the Kesef Mishnah, which was a tour de force of his knowledge of all the rabbinical literature. It wasn't just the Rambam based himself on everything, not just on the Bavli and the Yerushalmi and the Midrash Halacha, the Geonim. He knew it all. And then he wrote his Perush on the tour. And in the tour, what he did was he brought from every single important halachic work, and he created the dialogue between them. So when you read the Beis Yosef, And it's very important for a person to at least read the Beis Yosef at least once in his life. At least read it.
Just to go through it every month.
No, that's a Shulchan Aruch. Shulchan Aruch he built for everyone. Beis Yosef a little bit longer, maybe 3 times as long, 4 times as long, and just to see how a halachic mind really works. That first of all, he has to see everything. First of all, he brings everything and he debates between them. It's like he even lets them, in a certain manner, like the Talmud, sort of dialogue between them, the different sources. And it's only after he completed that and all the 4 parts of the Torah that he wrote the Shulchan Aruch. And then he already had said, in the end you have to do something. You have to decide between all this dialogue in the end, so what do you do? So that notion is very critical to Jewish thinking. That Hashem cannot be captured by one person. The only person who could capture what Hashem was saying, because he was saying it to him directly, was Moshe Rabbeinu. But after that, it spreads, it divides. Now, it doesn't mean that there has to be a machlokas. It's very interesting that it could still be. People look at it as like it's a lessening of the generations because there's a machlokas, because there's a dispute. It's not necessarily true. You don't have to dispute in the sense of not talking to each other. You can dispute in the sense of this has its validity and this has validity. We have to find a way to somehow unify or integrate these two opinions together. Really, I think that's the greatness of the direction of building a partzuf, a model of all the different meanings today. Like for instance, when you take a verse, and you can see that there's at least 10 basic commentaries on the Torah, and each one goes in his direction. So the way you think about it is, he says this, he says this. Each one represents a different sphera. Each one represents a different modality in understanding what this verse is saying. And to see the complete picture, you have to put it into a full model, into a model that encompasses everything. Okay. Because the Torah Shebechtav, like we said, is just the Abba. It's just the Chokhmah. It's not the Keter. The Keter is who wrote it, but what he wrote was the Chokhmah, and that's the Torah Shebechtav. And in general, Ktav is related to Chokhmah. That's why you see it. We see the Torah Shebechtav. Even though there's also a higher yichud, which is when you hear it being read on Shabbos or on Mondays and Thursdays. That is a yichud between Keter and the person's hearing, which is in Bina. It's a special yichud that it's considered the highest, even higher than looking at the letters themselves. Okay. Why is it called Yisoda? Because Yisoda is the kulmus, it's called. Yisoda is like the what do you call it? The quill. The foundation of father is a quill. Anything that's elongated like that, and in the end it gives out a drop. What's the whole idea of why do you have to write a Torah scroll with a quill and with ink? Because what is happening here is that the whole scribe, he himself represents all the sfirot together, creating the scroll. So his mind is the chokhmah. What is he? Usually he looks in another book. The other book that he's looking at is like telling him what to write. So that would be like his keter. And then his eyes that see what he needs to write and write what he needs to write on the new scroll, that's the chokhmah. And then it goes down through his hand, and it extends into a quill, which is his foundation. So it goes down from chokhmah, chesed, yesod. And then the drop that he brings out is the seed. It's like the seed that will now impregnate this new scroll. The scroll itself is like Malchus. So he does the whole operation. So it's called that he writes with a quill so that it becomes the foundation of Chokhmah, of his Chokhmah. Okay, let's skip a little bit.
Literally giving birth to the Torah.
Okay, so the Torah is a representation of the whole giving birth, the whole impregnation process. Okay, in any case, let's skip because we want to get to the Ikar here. Dinei klalut haTorah shebechtav, I'm skipping the next paragraph. Hu medaber b'inyan kiyum mitzvot aseh. The main idea behind the Torah, in the end, is the mitzvot that it tells us to do. That there are prescriptive mitzvot, and as Rashi brings in the first pasuk in the Torah, the first verse. Why didn't he start from Chodesh Zerachim? If the Torah is about performing mitzvot, it should have started from the first mitzvah. What's the first mitzvah? This month is the first month of the year. And you have to sanctify the month by calculating when it should be and by seeing it. Okay? And all that entails, and we haven't talked about that very much, but got 2 minutes to talk about it. Why is that the first mitzvah in the Torah? Why would the first mitzvah be to sanctify the new month? So the sages explain, based on the verses there, that Hashem gave us the power to rule over nature. That's what sanctifying the month means. When you sanctify the month, you're not just saying, "Oh, I'm going outside and I'm looking like I'm observing nature and collecting data." That would be somebody who's under nature. Somebody who's above nature. The thing that most people don't know is that even in the time when they sanctify the month based on going out and seeing the new moon, they didn't sanctify it. The court, the Sanhedrin, didn't sanctify it based on what the witnesses said. The witnesses were just sort of like an added detail that you needed in the sanctification. What did they sanctify it based on? Calculation. Only based on the calculation, meaning they don't need to. So says the Torah that even if you were mistaken in your calculation, even if you made a mistake, so you didn't calculate right, and we know that it's really a three-body problem which doesn't have a real solution. Mm-hmm. So you can't really calculate it to infinity. You can get very, very close. For all intents and purposes, you know when the new moon's going to be, and you know where it's going to show, and so on. But you can't make it exactly. Okay, so they made a little mistake here, a little mistake there. It didn't come out right. Or they decided for different reasons to, for instance, add a day to the previous month, even though the new moon already was. And this was by mistake because they didn't need that added day, and in later month they took it off. So says the Torah, Atem afilu shogegin. You, even if you make a mistake. Atem afilu mutin. Even if you were led astray by some calculation, somebody gave you information that was wrong and caused you to make the wrong calculation. Atem afilu mizidin. That you, even, meaning you have this responsibility of sanctifying the new moon, even if you decide on purpose to do something that's wrong, it's still sanctified. That's why we say, Mekadesh Yisrael v'azvanim. Hashem sanctifies Israel, and then he sanctifies the time. Because Am Yisrael sanctifies time. It decides, what does that mean? So the Rebbe was very fond of bringing at least two different Gemaras, two different passages in Talmud, and say that if something in nature changed because, according to Beis Din, according to the court, the Sanhedrin, it was now the next month, even though it wasn't. In nature, it's not yet. And they decided that it is. Or they redacted and they decided to go backwards on what they said, or whatever it was. Nature changes based on what they decided in the court. Time will go backwards in the sense of physical manifestations of what time does to a person's body. So that needs to be explained at length, but it's saying that that's the purpose of the mitzvot. The purpose of the mitzvot is to place man above nature. So obviously it has to come from his calculations. It cannot come by just observing nature. If you just observe nature, you're under nature. Okay. So the general idea behind Torah Shebechtav, the written Torah, is in order for a person to perform the prescriptive mitzvot, to place him above nature. שנמשכים מבחינת ו"ק שהוא בחינת זד האצילות שהאורות מחולקים בתוך הכלים של רמ"ח איברים דזה. So all this is easy to talk about. Why? Because this is light that integrates into the world. It's called the light of Tiferet, light of Zad, light we've been calling it, that fills all worlds, meaning that you're able to integrate it. Because I can tell somebody, go do something, so instead of he knows what to go do. He can understand, what do I need to do? I'm doing something here. The action itself is the vessel for the light that's coming down. So all this is very good when you talk about mitzvot aseh. But Omnam, so I'm skipping a little bit to 2 lines from the top here. Omnam, shoresh lo ta'aseh. Now there's the prohibitive mitzvot. Even though, afshen gamken b'torah shebichtav, they also are written down in the Torah, in the written Torah. Mikol makom en lemala mimadregat hamitzvot aseh. They are higher than the prescriptive mitzvot. The lo taseh is higher than the yaseh, than the prescriptive. The prohibitive is higher than prescriptive.
That's what we learned.
Why? Okay, then we started talking about it. מפני ששורש הלא תעשה הוא מבחינה ומדרגה גבוה שאינו יכול להתלבש בתוך כלים.
Concealed.
What's the idea here? That really everything should have been prescriptive. Because you're bringing light down into a vessel. I'm doing an action. The action carries a certain energy from above. I'm manifesting some energy through my action. An energy that is above the energy of nature. So how do I manifest when I don't do? You're not manifesting anything.
But you're breaking the vessel.
Why would I want to break a vessel? I want to make a vessel.
No, but by
Wait,
not...
wait.
Sorry.
It's a rhetorical question. So how can I... Everything should have been prescriptive. But he says here, but there are lights, there is energy that is so high that I cannot at this stage make a vessel for it. I simply can't. I can't contain it in something that I could do or make or put on tefillin, I do something. So it's a vessel for it. So how do I manifest energy that is too high for me? So the Torah's solution is by not doing, by refraining from doing. The refraining from doing, it's like it carves out a section of reality. And that carving out, like instead of making something, which is like me creating a mound in reality, I'm actually digging into reality. I'm creating some kind of vessel by not doing it. And it's a negative vessel. What is this like? This is like how the Rambam described the Shem. He said you can't describe Hashem by positive statements. Only by negating the positive statements. Negating is not the same as the opposite. Like, let's say you say he's not wise. I don't mean to say he's stupid. Hashem is not stupid. But he's not wise in the sense that he's not wise in the sense that I understand wise. His wisdom is some kind of wisdom that's not the wisdom that I understand. So the negation implies something higher. In the same way, when a person does something, so that's the positive. And when he negates the positive, he's not doing the opposite. He's just saying, on Shabbos I cannot do some types of malacha, some types of work. By not doing them, I'm reaching a higher level in that same work, meaning I'm elevating it. I'm going to the source of that particular function. So for instance, if I'm not allowed to grind things on Shabbos, I'm not allowed to put vessels together on Shabbos, so I'm going to the source of what that action is. And by refraining from it, I'm not doing the opposite. I'm not saying, because I'm not allowed to grind, I should spend all Shabbos long putting stuff back together, because I'm also not allowed to do that. So what am I doing? I'm going to the source of what it means to grind. Okay? So for instance, there's one that's very famous, that it says you cannot set fire on Shabbos. Okay? So what does that mean? That I'm going to the source of not setting fire. What is the source of not setting fire? The source of it is, what am I doing? That there's no din, there's no gvurot, there's no sense of judgment on Shabbos. And by negating fire, I'm not saying, okay, so I'm going to the opposite. Let's all be water. No, it says the gvurot, the judgments on Shabbos, they go back to their source. They're sweetened at their source. Everything is sweetened in its source on Shabbos. It's not that I do the opposite. It's not, but whatever was fire now becomes sweetened fire. It goes back to its source. So the famous thing that comes out of that is that, for instance, how do we represent that? How do we do that? And it's only the sages that brought this about, is that we light Shabbos candles. The Shabbos candles are a representation of the same judgment, the same fire, but that I have to do it. What do you mean I have to? Because I'm showing here, again, it's an innovation of the sages. It doesn't say in the Torah to light Shabbos candles. But they brought it, they said, what you're doing now is you're revealing the source of the fire. And the source of the fire is sweetened fire. What does sweetened fire do? It brings peace into the home. Why? Because it lets people see one another. Now, they say it like they don't bump into one another, but in the end, it creates peace because that's what it does. Can give all the different reasons around it, but in the end, it's simply that's what it does.
Rashi's daughters are credited for that. Shabbos candles.
No, it's from the Gemara. What do you mean?
Really?
Of course. It's after Rashi.
I thought it was Rashi's daughters that were credited.
No, it's one of the seven. It's one of the seven commandments from the sages. So we're talking about somewhere between Shlomo and Second Temple, sometime there.
The bracha.
But not all of them. Some of
bracha
them a
as
little
well?
bit later.
The chadlik ner.
Brachos are one of the seven commandments. So yes, so we brought the Birkot mitzvot to say a bracha before a mitzvah. It's from them also. Okay. מפני ששורש הלא תעשה הוא מבחינת המדרגה גבוה שאינו יכול להתלבש בתוך כלים כמו מצוות עשה. So the light that the prohibitive is trying to bring down, it's doing it with a negation because it's so high, this light, that you can't put it into a regular vessel. Sort of like, what do you put antimatter into? כמו מצוות עשה, like regular, the regular
vacuum,
light.
into a vacuum.
I guess so. You have to hold it in
Suspended.
They suspend it in a sort of plasma or something. I don't know exactly
But completely.
you can't touch anything.
Can't touch anything.
Yeah. So that's like a negation in some way.
So hang on a sec. With fire, just back to your example of fire. 1 second. So you're saying that in the world of choil, fire
Consumes.
can be destructive.
Yeah, it
Consumes. But on a Shabbos, the fire can be beneficial.
Right.
That's the difference between the two.
Right. And by the way, that's
Like can bring heat or warmth or comfort but
especially the connection between people, because what it's meant to do is to connect people so that they can see each other. That's basically what the Gemara says. But the reason it's called a candle of peace in the home is because it allows people to see one another. Okay, in any case, so tefillin ve'etrog, so when you put tefillin on, you take etrog on sukkos, hem kelim le'or, they're vessels that contain light. But with the prohibitive, you're not creating a vessel, you're negating it. So this is a higher light that has no vessel that it can be contained in. It can't be done by an action, it has to do by negating something. So what it represents really is some kind of concept that you cannot fathom its essential meaning. Now this is a very important thing. What he's saying here is all of Chassidus sees human life as instrumental. Instrumental, what do I mean? I mean that you never encounter the essence. You're always encountering only the way it manifests, the way it shows itself to you. And whenever I'm talking about Hashem, so it says Hashem, you can't know my essence. How are you going to know me? You know me by looking at my actions, how I manifest myself. So if I manifest myself this way, you understand me this way. When I'm angry, you understand me as anger. That's one of the things about our false idols in the modern age is that we have a concept of Hashem that's prefigured, and we try to run with it our whole lives. And when it doesn't fit, so Hashem's not with me. Hashem's not here. Okay? If something happens to me that doesn't seem to jive with how I understand Hashem, so somehow I'm like, Hashem's not here. The whole trick is that wherever I am in life, Hashem Elokechem Elokim Chaimu, He's the God of life. So wherever life takes you, whatever the challenge, it doesn't matter, whatever you're faced with, Hashem is in that. Even if it doesn't look like this makes any sense to you. Like, Hashem's not supposed to be that way. What's going on here? Because I can only know Hashem through what He gives me. I can't know Him by some abstract knowledge I've grabbed onto Him. That's what the Zohar says. Leit machshavat tfisa bach. No thought can grab Hashem, can hold Hashem. You can't do that, because that's idolatry. It's idolatry in your thought. So the biggest challenge is to embrace whatever He's sending me now, because that's where He is. In fact, we always try to run away from it when it doesn't suit us, so we turn our face from life. It's like turning your face from Hashem. If I don't like what I'm being dealt, so I say, I'll try to get out of it. But you can't go backwards. You can only go forwards. And you can go forwards because Hashem is telling you always you have to choose life. What does it mean to choose life? To choose where you are. You have to choose it. The moment that you choose it, Hashem will reveal Himself in that. Because right now it's like just a garment. But He wants you to know Him through that. So we only know Hashem through what He's dealing us, what He's showing us. But how can you know the essence itself? You can't know the essence of what He is. That's called Hasagata Mahut. If I would be able to know the essence, then I would understand everything. But there's no Hasagata Mahut in this world. You only know the Metziut. You only know reality, or you only know the reality of Hashem, but you don't know His essence. Except for this, he says. That the lotase, the negation, is the only possible means to come close to the essence. The negation gives you some connection with what cannot be grasped. That's the whole idea of negation, because I can't bring it down into a vessel, and yet somehow I've been given a prohibitive commandment that by negating a certain action, I am connecting at some degree to the essence, to Hashem's essence. So the prescriptive mitzvot, they only bring down His presence. They only bring down what we would call His manifestation, what He presents to me, what He shows to me, how He acts. But He Himself, that can only be grasped through the prohibitive. And it's only grasped, again, it's by negation. It's not exact, like a person who's very, very careful. I think I gave this example once that I very much liked from somebody who said this to me in Toronto. But when a person is in a nuclear plant and he has fear of the radiation, you can't see the radiation, you can't grab the radiation, but he's the closest there is to understanding the essence of radiation, because he does everything very carefully. This you don't do, this you don't do, this you don't do. There's more don't than there is do. And that don't, in a sense, gives
safety.
Is that safety, as it were, that sort of encompasses the concept of what radiation is. You can sort of understand from that what the essence of radiation is. In the same way, when you look at a person who has a lot of yirat shamayim, a lot of fear of heaven, the fear of heaven is like understanding Hashem in His essence in what cannot be understood.
Actually brings you closer.
It almost like draws the contours of what the essence is, but you can never really grab the essence. But you have the contours of it, because here I don't come, here I don't come. So it sort of like gives you a contour of what is inside here. It's sort of like knowing something by indirectly. And sort of, if a person is in a room, so you look at his heat signature. Mm-hmm. So you don't see he himself. You ignore it. What you're looking at is only at the borders what is emanating heat. Okay? So it's like drawing a contour of what the essence of Hashem is. That's what the prohibitive mitzvot do. That's why Shabbos is much, much higher than anything. That's why it's true that people first connect, because it's integrated light. They first connect through tefillin, through something, through arba meaning, and shaking the lulav is like the witchcraft. It's a magic for everybody. They love it. Why? Because finally you give me something I can do. Otherwise, Judaism is all about don't. What are you talking about? What's all this don't? Settle, because we're dealing with some essence which cannot be grasped. And the only way to draw a contour of it is to refrain from this, and keep away from it. And that brings down His essential light, His more essential light.
I have to go down.
Okay. So that's it for this week. And B'ezrat Hashem, we'll resume on Tuesday next week.
So this actually is very similar to the mitzvah of building a fence on your roof.
Right.
Yeah.
B'ezrat Hashem.
B'ezrat Hashem.